Welcome back. Hello again. My name is Dr. Carraway-Stage. I'm an assistant professor of nutrition science at East Carolina University. This video is a part of a series of short presentations that describe how to write a research manuscript for the first time. As just a quick reminder, I do tend to focus on nutrition research that uses human subjects. So if you are from a different field, understand most of this information does apply across the board. But in some fields, things might be slightly different. So make sure to compare and contrast the ideas you see here with what is actually expected or accepted in your field. So the next few minutes, I'm going to talk about how to write the introduction section. Basically, the purpose of the introduction is to set the stage for your research manuscript. So this section is going to tell the reader what is the broad problem you're investigating, what is the significance of that work, and what it is exactly that you're trying to do. So ultimately, the goal of your introduction is going to be to present the importance of your research within the context of what's currently published around that topic. You literally want to answer questions such as, what is it that you are actually studying? Why was your research question even important? What did we currently know about the research before we even did the study? And how is it that the research that you did is going to advance our current knowledge of that research? You can typically approach your introduction in 3 simple sections. These sections will allow the reader to evaluate whether or not they actually have an interest in your general topic. But the 3 sections are to establish a general research area, clearly identify what that gap is, and then provide a rationale for why your study is important. So when thinking about establishing a general research area, you should provide some broad context. What does previous research say about your topic? What does it say about your study? Present background information that is needed to support your position. So what does that previous literature say, and how does it support the need for your study? Now, it's important to understand that the reader doesn't want to know everything about your topic. So choose things wisely, choose evidence wisely that supports or doesn't support your study, but make sure that you don't write too much information there. There's a lot of other sections within the manuscript that are important. And so the reader doesn't necessarily need to know every single thing about the subject that you're researching, just enough to establish the research area. Now, you also need to clearly identify the gap when you're writing this introduction. It's really important that the reader can get a good understanding of what previous findings in this area were, and get a good understanding of where research is still needed. And it's important that you make it clear that the study that you are doing or have done is extending that knowledge in some capacity. And then finally, provide a rationale. So describe the importance for why your study was needed. Why was it even worth doing in the first place? And make that very clear to the reader. Now, generally the structure to the introduction can follow something very similar to an inverted triangle. So starting very broad with your topic and then moving to something more narrow, something more focused. So for instance, if you were looking at fruit and vegetable consumption in children, your broad topic might be childhood obesity. So you might start the introduction talking about the need for interventions because of childhood obesity. And then you might narrow down further in looking at fruit and vegetable consumption or some sort of intervention to improving fruit and vegetable consumption. And the idea being that fruit and vegetable consumption increasing would hopefully be preventative of obesity later on in adulthood. Now, you would organize this information to present general aspects of that topic as well as more specific information until you finally arrive towards the end. So this little tip when you're actually presenting your problem statement, the purpose for your study, and maybe your research questions. Now, interestingly, some researchers actually prefer to write the introduction section last. This actually ensures that the content that is in your methods, results, and discussion are truly reflected in your introduction and vice versa. So if you do decide to do this, make sure before you draft this introduction section that you go back and read these sections and make sure everything flows well. But you can see within this chart we have our purpose, our methods, our results discussion, and then we have our introduction section towards one of the last pieces that are being written. Now Madison does a good job of explaining how she approached this issue. Just as a quick reminder, Madison is a nutrition science student, and here's her opinion on the topic.
Step by step, like one section at a time, and also making sure that they have kept the same focus throughout, because I think that your introduction needs to be related to your discussion and vice versa, and sometimes when your findings are not what you expect, you change focus in the discussion and it's not addressing what you set out to in the introduction. So kind of going back at the end and not just doing your introduction and then dismiss, like you need to relate that back to the first part to make sure it's consistent throughout.
So last few tips before I close this video out for the introduction. Make sure that you are writing the introduction in past tense. You have completed your study. You are now writing the paper. The work has been done. It should be in past tense. So when you're writing that introduction, actually when you're writing the majority of your paper, it should be in past tense. Also note that the length of your introduction is going to be very dependent on the journal you are planning to submit to and or other guidelines that you might have. A lot of times introduction lengths will be different based on the journal or the field even. In nutrition journals, typically our introductions tend to be fairly short, whereas if you are going to submit to an educational journal, those introductions tend to be much, much longer. So make sure you're checking back to your guidelines to determine whether or not it should be short or long. So that's the conclusion of our introduction video. Join us next for the methods.